You're in the Army, and how do you make a transition from the Army, thinking about doing 20 years, all of a sudden you move into radio?
Right. Because I, really had no interest in being in radio. Never thought that that was what I was going to do. And I had a high school friend, didn't grow up in the community I grew up in. He grew up in a larger community closer to Pittsburgh. Anyway, his dad was like a part-time radio personality, and he always wanted to do that. And he went in the Army also, like myself. But then he got out and he actually got a job in the radio business back in Pittsburgh. Then later
Hmm.
got hired to go to New York City, ended up over there. I'm in the Army and he asked me to come visit him in New York. Long story short, I went to New York just for like 2 days. I mean, I'd never been to New York City or anything. And I
Hmm.
went to see him, saw him on the radio. And he introduced me to the famous Chuck Leonard, who
Oh,
happened
yeah.
to be the first and only African American talent at the famous WABC. I mean, the
Follow Cousin
premier
Brucey.
top
Yeah.
40 radio station of the 1960s and 70s in New York City or in America. And Chuck was there. And I met him, and he took me to WABC just to see the building and all that stuff inside.
Hmm.
And he
Yeah.
introduced me to the famous Rick Sklar, not knowing now that I'd become a radio personality myself later. And this man loved my talent. But anyway, so I'm over there watching them, and I'm like, you guys get paid to do this? And they're like, yeah. And I was like, wow, that's interesting. So I went on about my business, back to brag, re-enlist and all that. Then I go overseas and I come back. And when I come back, I get sent to Gannon University in Erie, Pennsylvania. And I'm there on the ROTC staff. I had two students because they demanded that freshmen and sophomores be in the ROTC program to learn discipline, so on and so forth. And two kids came to me and they said, hey, Sarge, by then I'm a sergeant. And they said to me, hey, Sarge, we're having trouble with our classes. Could you tutor us? And I said, sure. I said, when do you have some time? They said, we have after school jobs. I said, what do you do? They said, we're on the radio. I said, what do you mean you're on the radio? So we're disc jockeys, as they called it. And the rest of the world calls us presenters. But anyway, so I
Yeah.
said, well, I'll tell you what, I'll make time. I could do that. I said, but I want something from you. They said, what do you want? I said, can I come and watch you? I said, I'm just curious. I'd like to see kind of how this works. I've watched some other people, but it was different. So they said, okay. So then I watched them, as you know, and I kept saying to myself, maybe I could do that. And then one of the kids said to me, how would you like to make a tape? I said, okay. And he took me in a production studio. He got permission to do that. And we made a little tape of my voice. And then he played it for some other people at the station. The owner slash general manager also, this Arthur Arkalian I mentioned to you at WWYN, and played it for him. And he said, I'd like to talk to you. And he said, how would you like to have a part-time job here? And I was like, oh, no, I couldn't do that. I'm on active duty. And if I did do that, I'd have to get permission from my colonel, my commanding officer, to be allowed to do such a thing. And I said, you think I could actually do that? They said, oh, yeah, we like the way you sound. I told the colonel, took the tape, let him hear it. And he said, yeah, go up there and do it if you want. You can do it after hours. And
Cool.
that's how I messed around and stumbled into radio.
Wow. Because a lot of people sometimes get into things, in odd ways, into radio, people that I've met along the way. And, maybe sometimes maybe that's the better way to get in, because you don't have any preconceived anything and, you don't freak out and stuff.
Could I just say this real quick? Because
Absolutely.
I mentioned this to you, which my grandmother, my great grandmother, is responsible for all of this, meaning her prayers and things of that nature. But she used to say to me, she said, son, speak the King's English. She said, if you speak the King's English, she said, it'll take you a long way. Well, I had no idea, just being articulate, not having any regional dialect, not having any ethnic sound to my voice, could actually give me a career. But she was into, reading. She'd make me read out loud. And I would,
Hmm.
first she'd make me read out loud from the Bible, but then she'd have me read out loud from the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette or the
Hmm.
Pittsburgh Press newspaper, news stories.
Yeah.
And so that's how I got into reading out loud confidently. But that I thought I'd just throw that out there.
Wow, your grandmother's was pretty astute, especially what back then.
You remember the magazine called Broadcasting Magazine?
For sure, yeah, yeah, yeah.
And all these people at the radio station would read it. And I'd say, what's that thing? They said, oh, that's Broadcasting Magazine. And it tells you about, engineering things, technology, but about talent, whether it was
Hmm.
music talent or news people, that sort of thing. And they said, and there's classifieds in the magazine for individuals to try to fill positions. I said, oh, really?
Yep.
Can I read that? They said, oh, yeah, here's a couple of old copies. You could have them. So I started reading them and I'm thinking, huh, what would happen if I applied for a couple of these jobs? I wonder if anybody would think I'm any good. So I told Pat, would you help me do this? Maybe we can make some copies and tapes and I'll send them out just to see what happens.
Yeah.
So I did. And I included a picture of myself in uniform, right? Because I wasn't thinking about civilian clothes, right? So I'm thinking, what the heck?
Right, right.
So So we sent out about 25 or 30 of these things, right, all around the country, right, just to see what's going to happen. Now
Yeah. Didn't we all?
I still got a year and a half to go on active duty, right? But anyway, I just
Oh
want to see
wow.
what happened. And I got like about 10 or 12 responses offering me jobs. And I was
Wow.
like, wow, this is crazy. But the one in Houston was a big deal. Mr. Dick Oppenheimer, God rest his soul. This man, I became like a son to him later. But the point is, he got in touch with me. He called me
Hmm.
and he said, I want to offer you a job. And I said, well, gee, I can't take it. He said, well, I said, I'm on active duty. He said, well, I saw that picture. You're in a uniform and everything. So I just thought maybe that was a picture you just sent us, And I said, no, I'm on active duty. And he said, well, do me a favor. Could you send me another tape, but another picture of you? You'll find this interesting, but it wear civilian clothes. I said, okay, no problem. So I did. Then he called me back again and he said, you told me you're on active duty this. He said, when do you get out? I said, well, I got like a year and a half to go. He said, well, you know what? He said, I'm going to be honest with you why I asked you for a second picture. I said, well, why was that? He said, because I thought you were a white guy that liked R&B music and you wanted to get a job on an R&B slash black radio station, a black music station. And he said, and down here in Texas, that would not work. He says, but you're actually a black guy. I said, absolutely. He said, well, the way you speak, he said, you fit into general market radio and all of that. And I was like, yeah. I said, I said, where I grew up and everybody in my family, we speak the same way and everybody's college educated and so on and so forth. I said, I'm the only college dropout. And at that time, before my
Right.
master's degree. And he said, well, if you decide to get out of the military, he said, call me. He said, because even if I don't have a job, I'll make room for you. He said, because I
Wow.
think you're the future of what black radio could be.